I want to talk to you about a thing, I don't know what else to call it, the basic issue. I just later, years of later in life, I've grown up a little bit, and it's sort of recent have I discovered that Jesus was a storyteller. And I've spent my life pretty much trying to bring people into some doctrinal clarity, and only to discover the kingdom is different than that, and more than that. And so when I found out I was a storyteller, the Lord began to challenge me. Why don't you tell the story? And I felt incapable. I'm capable of doing what I used to do. and I found myself. And so if you would be patient with me and try to hear me, and let me tell you the story as I think it unfolds. I think it might be a gift to you. In the primordial past, a deep injury happened to all of humanity. The injury is more profound than anybody can understand. Everybody wants to argue and complain and try to figure it out, but the books and the history and archaeology and the wisdom, all of it contributes to the fact that somewhere in time an injury happened to all humanity, and that injury can most carefully be explained as a change from a giver to a taker. And I don't know why that's so moving to me, but many of us who are believers really believe we were created to be givers. God's nature is a giver. And when I wanted to explain or express that to our grandchildren, to others, it really started to hit me that it isn't doctrinal. It's something injury. There's an injury that we need to deal with, and so then I could perceive that Jesus came to heal that injury. He came as a representative of God and was the consummate giver. He was a giver beyond anything. Part of the reason I am a believer now was because I saw him as a giver 60, 70 years ago. And as a giver, he came to heal my injury. That means that it was God's son. He was a pattern son. He was true humanity. He was human as God intended. And when we are human as God intends, we become a giver. I thought, man, if it's that simple, why hasn't somebody helped me understand it? Now, Jesus is a true giver, and then he says these words to us very simply. If you follow me, I will make you a giver. And I thought, oh my goodness, is the story that clear? Yes, it really is. And so I began to follow the Lord, and I really have experienced him changing me from a taker to a giver. And I thought, yes, that's really how it works. And And another thing I discovered was I didn't need any help to become a taker. Somehow I think I was born as a professional taker, and so then I thought, no, I don't want to deal with that doctrinally. I want to deal with it relationally and in the story. In the time following Jesus, it all became very complicated. He said, follow me and I will make you. And then Christianity starts to unfold 2,000 years. And what happened was givers became takers. And takers seemed to be able to give in some way that brought confusion to everybody, because it wasn't as clean and as carefully thing as everybody presented it. And there's a thing called confirmational bias, meaning I hear things only that confirm where I am, and I found myself confirmed in my own religious intensity, and I didn't want to live there. Jesus responds to this confusion by taking his kingdom underground. He chooses mystery and spirituality and relational reality, and his kingdom comes without observation. And I thought, I'm beginning to understand that. He sees what I want you to see, which is the moment the kingdom comes to the surface and everybody sees the success and the numbers and the people, arguments start. Who's the true believer and who is the real and who is the good guy, and all that starts to come down in some strange way. There's a competition starts and arguments, and I was part of those arguments, and we're going to approve who is the good, but Jesus does it kind of differently. He measures it all by fruit. He said, you will see and understand the difference between a giver and a taker. If you really see it as it actually is, all the talk and all the stuff starts to disappear, and we start reducing it to a basic issue, which is who's there to give you and who is there to take you. And it's in marriage, it's in business, it's in church, it's in religion, it's everywhere. And now our whole society is moving towards being a taker. And I think, oh my God, somebody better tell the story and tell it right. Now, when Jesus uses mystery, he tells us something that is kind of shocking to me, which was, he said, don't worry about that, Bob. The first shall be last, and the last shall be first. And then I realized what he was doing was mysterious, which was he was building towards something that was real and eternal, and all the activity and all that relative value. And so then it goes, I made notes so I didn't wander. I wanted to stay on track, and I wanted you to hear this. The moment the kingdom mystery is seen and it's successful, and we have 2,000 people in our church, and I realized then the arguments and the competition and the assassination and a verbal assault on each other. And I thought, oh man, and that forces me to a question which I want to ask you, and I want you to ask me. And I hear this all the time, and the question says to me, Bob, are you a Christian? And my answer to that is changing. My answer is, being a Christian thing is increasingly hard to define. If I define Christian by who's a giver and who's a taker, that leaves a lot of confusion. And so I've taken a position, and I want you to consider this position for your own, which is, my answer now is, that's uncertain for me, all of that, Christian. But what I do know is I am a follower of Christ, and he is intending to make me a giver. And when I say that on the plane, in the store, whenever I give my witness that way, I've never had anybody refuse or reject. They're just humbled by the fact that, could it be that simple? And I could tell you stories, and I'm fighting that now. I don't want to do that. But are you a Christian? Well, what I am is a follower of Christ. And some days I follow him more perfectly than others. Some days I really do mess it up, and I do become a taker in one form or another until I can see what's happening. And like you, the reason I did this is because I believe that if you've watched this thing through, you want to be a giver and not a taker. That's what's in your heart. And for my last point, just so you hear me, for safety reasons, would you begin to consider how dangerous it is to follow a taker? I don't care what, political, academic, religious, takers are real. Givers are rare. If Jesus said, follow me, because he's a giver. We kid about it in the real world. Follow the money. I thought, wow. So here's what I'm saying. The simple story is the human injury turned us from givers to takers. Healing that injury is what Jesus is after. Follow Jesus, he's a giver, and follow men and women who are also givers and not takers.